Okay, hi everybody. This is Kubernetes SIG architecture for July 23rd. Um, so, a couple topics on the agenda. The first one is release cadence. So we wanted to start shopping around the idea. Well, David, I'll let you talk. You're the one who put it on
Yeah.
the agenda.
So one of the things that came up near the end of Cap Freeze here is like 4 months is a really long time for someone to wait if they miss a particular freeze, which makes people press more on, can I get an exception? Can I get this landed just before the day? Please don't make me late by just a little bit. Um, and I sympathize with that and remember the time when we actually did ship 4 releases a year. And it was busy, but it wasn't terrible. And I'd say, I think towards the tail end, those releases were actually quite stable and consistent um, in terms of their quality levels. It's not like they were
So,
getting progressively worse.
so
So
here's a crazier idea, David. You said what about 4 releases a year? But what if we did 12 releases a year and we just had a every month on the this month, was the cap freeze for 2 months from now, or whatever it is, whatever cadence we want to put as like the different things, and just like if that way you miss the train, big deal. You get on the next train a month later, you don't have to press so hard.
I would be entirely open to that. And trying to line it up so that you do uh, one like a series of freezes, so it's not the you get your stuff in landed immediately. You just have an expectation of like, yeah, you'll be in there when you get it.
Looks like we have some hands. I think Ben was first.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very interesting idea. I think that I know there are a number of places in the project would have to be improved. We have a lot of pretty like heavy manual processes for the release, so doing them a lot more frequently is gonna be a problem. Also, just like we have constantly had this push pull. Like the reason we went to 3 a year was some kind of awkward compromise with a one of the iterations of workgroup LTS. If we do like 12 releases a year, we're gonna have to redefine our like support model again. And one of the mechanisms that
Yeah,
is not in good shape right now that will have to handle that better is ch- cherry picks and patch releasing.
and our
Processes are
SKU,
kind
our,
of
all of
expensive, and there's not many people handling like reviewing backports.
and all of our SKU support has to change. Right? It's going to be like n minus
Yes.
14 or something.
Also things like, and I'm not saying these are hard blockers, just that, like they
Yeah,
would take some investment and agreement from people. The CI stuff also has kind of bad sig release on some tooling that like sort of forks the jobs from what's running on master now to like the next release branch, and then takes older release branches and like reduces how frequently we're running them. That tooling is really broken, and so like the 3 times a year we just kind of like manually fix up
right.
uh a bunch of stuff. S Things like that would actually have to get fixed, and it is a decent amount of work. If people are interested, though, I feel like we might be able to make an argument. I know my employer is very interested in releasing faster. Like, we have a lot of
Right.
demand from users to fix things, and in the era of vibe coding, they don't understand why it's gonna take us a year to get them a solution,
Right.
but it will be expensive.
Yes.
So
Sergey?
I can definitely see that going from 3 to 12 would absolutely require like all those improvements or investments in automation. Going from 3 to 4, I think would also carry benefit, but would not put as a hard precondition. This must happen. I mean, a SIG release, I'm sure would tell us exactly what it was, but it seems a lot more practical as a stepping stone to say, okay, we're going to improve a little bit, and our longer term goal is to improve this much.
Yeah, it has both incrementally, it's an incremental improvement, but it's an incremental amount of work, but it's also just an incremental improvement, right? It's not a dramatic improvement. So I don't know, like if, anyway, but that's are all open to discussion. I think Kevin, or no, Sergey still hasn't said anything.
Yeah, I agree with like 4 makes things a little bit better. 12 will redefine like supportability and load on SIGs to support all that will be quite higher. I just don't know if we have enough maintainers and willingness to spend time on that.
I'm I'm not convinced that's true. Like it because instead of it all coming crunching 3 or 4 times a year, it would be a continuous thing, and the pressure of a miss would be lower, much, much lower. So I mean, it's to be seen, right? Like I could be completely wrong, and you could be completely right, but to me, I'm not entirely sure that it's actually more work for SIG release. It's 100% more work, right? For uh, for automating it and building the infrastructure to do that we don't have, and fixing the manual processes to be automated. It's like a huge amount of work. For the rest
It
of the
is
things,
more
I'm
work
not
for SIGs,
convinced.
John. Like they have to triage the like bug reports for those things. They have to review like backport review is bottlenecked on the SIG release part. But if we start doing like 12 releases, then if I'm a kubelet approver, I need to review a patch being rewritten
Yeah,
back 12 releases or
12
something.
releases.
Like
Yeah,
it
It's a
maybe it's not
combination with
the,
insurmountable, but
continuous.
it is more work.
the drift between each release is much, much less, right? So it's like those backports are simpler, right? So
I
it's
think it's
not
more
like
complicated to reason about. So it does have some cost to the SIGs.
Yeah, and second topic I want to bring up is I think bottleneck right now, like in this release, bottleneck was API reviews. Like we have so many caps that was approved by SIG, but like API reviews wasn't happening. Which is, I mean, solving this problem will relieve a lot of pain right now because once we have all the caps we want immersed in a milestone, then it'll be much easier going forward. People will not be so agitated to because they need to wait now. Uh, so I think yeah, release is not the only problem we need to solve. API approvers and in general, like reviews, will be very important to solve as well.
yeah, and it's definitely more work for like like docs and all that, right? Um, I
It's
don't know who's
Kevin.
next, Kevin. Okay.
Uh, yeah, I guess like I've always feel like there's two schools of thought for Kubernetes, like from the AI. I guess for me it was a batch. I don't know what for agents, but for batch workloads, we always felt like Kubernetes was releasing too slow. But then a lot of times what we ended up doing was kind of having like a sub project like queue or job set where we can iterate with things on top of Kubernetes. And that tends to be a pattern that we're suggesting more and more. And I mean, and I guess that's what the sort of is. I'm never clear with like what we really need to put in core Kubernetes versus what we can do like out of tree. And like even with for Q, we do a release every 2 months, and that is hard. From I maintain a queue downstream, and it's quite hard to keep up with that for things. But from the AI users, it's like still pretty slow considering how much money I guess they spend on infra. And I don't know if 3 to 4 really fits moves the needle very much, but also like I wonder, like, we don't have a great, basically, even though we have these SIG projects, we're not really like we don't have like a graduation process for SIG projects to say like, hey, this is like production ready. And like maybe that's something that would help a little bit more, because like I see it with DRA where we're kind of encouraging way more things out of tree, but then it's hard because then we have to have people productizing those things
Right.
also. And so I don't know, and that's sort of where like I think there's a balance that I don't know, like if people really need things to go quickly, iterating out of tree will probably be better. But we also sort of need to have some way of like stabilizing some of the stuff out of tree so that downstream people know it's actually ready to use and not just like a toy project. Anyway, long-winded way of, yeah, I'm not sure if I agree or disagree, but that's at least what I'm seeing from keps and working with projects like Q, where like we are, there's a downside where Q, we've released a lot of things. Now we have to kind of piece together some of the work with like workload aware scheduling and figure out how to like undo some of the things we were doing in Q to kind of mesh again back with like the scheduling stuff. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, I'm not sure the answer here.
I think that's why we are where we are. We are all not sure the answer. Ben?
Yeah, I don't know that if it moves the needle enough for the AI customers, but any change we make, like we're talking about within the project, it will also affect the users that aren't trying to go super fast for like the support lifecycle and things. We already have
Yes.
like sizable contingent of users that are like, can you just LTS? Can you stop changing things? I just want bug fixes, and accelerating and probably moving even further away from that has some downside. Also, just the ecosystem. Like, I mean, our own sub projects, but all the external sub projects, uh, the I've seen a lot where our release cadence and support lifetimes kind of set the tone for the other, like sort of the open source support model versus what you might get proprietary for like the external projects. If I'm building an external project, I'm going to say I support the versions Kubernetes supports, and I'm not
Yeah.
necessarily going to try to support the versions that
Well,
can't be patched anymore. So if we
I
when
think
we
that
change that, we also need to think about those.
I think that like going to something like 12 is such a would be a massive change also to like we don't have the discovery mechanisms. We do, but like they're just nobody really uses them that
You also
way.
you have to
Like,
communicate this out widely. Um,
yeah,
anyhow, I don't know if it solves that problem, but I want to say that when we went from 4 to 3, one of the things that I've lamented from that this whole time is that like the 4 a year kind of matched naturally to like business quarters, and
yeah,
the 3 a year is kind of annoying to plan when the rest of the business is doing like semester or quarter planning and things don't neatly align. And I think that also contributes to the perception that if you want to do something in Kubernetes, it's going to like take too long because it's going to span even more planning cycles awkwardly. That that might not directly address the user, but I think it might address some of the like business isn't sure about contributing to core. And then lastly, to Kevin's point about core or not, I hear you, but like we also have like I'm sure from Signode, there's a lot of things that are very difficult to do entirely out of core. And even if you want to build them, it's like we're adding the extension like DRA, right? We need to like
yeah.
add the extension mechanism, and the timeline for that holds up those out of core efforts too.
I think Janet was next. Not sure.
Yeah. So I want to follow up on Kevin mentioned about sub-project. So I want to share that in Agent Sandbox, we release basically every week. We have a lot of automation for streamlining the release process. We also have the automation for parsing all the commit and then generate draft release notes using some help with LLM. And the human does the final polishing and publishing of the release notes. I think a lot of things can be automated better now. So maybe it's a good time for us to revisit the process and frequency of Kubernetes and plus one for that. And something we need to think about is also the conformance and AI conformance because that follows the release cadence as well. That means if we release more frequently, that means people need to certify more frequently as well. There's the whole certification of when your certification will expire that needs to be figured.
Yeah, a lot of things are locked to that version number as opposed to locked to this is what I was talking about with discovery, right? Like people lock to I support this version of Kubernetes rather than I support Kubernetes that have this feature in GA or this feature in beta or later, right? Like, and because we lock so much to those version numbers, if we started versioning every 12, it would totally screw with the ecosystem. So I think that's a good point.
I mean, ecosystem needs to be adapted to streamline their upgrades as well. Like it is never like just upstream changing how it works. It's also like how downstream will adapt to that.
Yeah. I don't know who's next, if it's Swati or Dan.
I think it's me.
Okay.
Not very sure. Yeah, so I think my point is if we were to go from 3 releases to 4 releases, it would effectively reduce the development window. And that necessarily doesn't impact features because, like I think if we were to um, consider successful features, those are features that essentially go into the release cycle well prepared, and they have potentially a POC, and they're not doing a lot of development work in the cycle itself. But I think what is impacted is like the reviewer bandwidth and the approver bandwidth, which is already low, and with the you know um, with more and more features coming due to agentic AIs and more contributors kind of contributing, it means there's more pressure on reviewers and approvers. So, reducing that development cycle impacts, you know, the bandwidth that reviews and approvers in Kubernetes has. Um, at least from my point of view, when I noticed that we went from 4 to 3, I felt there was more uh, more space for people to review and kind of, at least from Signal point of view, I noticed that we were getting more bandwidth to effectively review features and make significant progress from that point of view. Um, I don't know. I know Sergey is here, and I believe um, he was there in Signal at the time, and we've kind of increased a huge amount of features, considering a lot of changes that we made in the process. But I think this one pops out to me specifically because we are going to have more features and a smaller window to actually get those features reviewed. Um, and I think that's I think my concern, at least if we were to move from 3 back to 4 a year.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
I don't
think.
know. Maybe go ahead,
But
sir.
can I reply? Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's the other way around. So when we had 4 releases, it was less features every release, and it was less burden on deciding what goes and what doesn't go. So I felt like we did less like less features per release because there is always next one pretty close by. Um, Now we need to do a lot of work to decide like all these like record numbers of caps are going from the fact that releases are so rare. So if you want to increase velocity, you need to just swamp every single
That,
release with so many features.
that's kind of how I feel too. And I mean, that it's hard to know what's an artifact of just people wanting to accelerate more and what's um an artifact of longer release cycles. It's hard to know, but like I feel like our we've also like I don't know, it feels like sometimes the features seem to get so large so quickly. I don't know. It feels like much heavier, but that may be just illusion. Um,
Oh, I think that's a fair point. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
just
I
the
also
pressure of having kind of broader time spans between releases. It just makes people feel that, you have to evaluate things more, uh, like the pressure is way more, as opposed to, if that frequently we have releases, that kind of
mhm.
depressurizes the situation to some
And you can
extent.
like do a small scope, and then you can do expand that scope a little bit, as opposed to like,
Sure.
well, if I want to get this in the next year, I need to do all of it in the alpha. Like it feels
right.
like
Like the
Absolutely.
the the current situation means that people feel a lot of pressure because if you need most features need to start in alpha, and that means your minimum is 1 year. So if you miss the current lengthy release cycle, you're starting a 1 year clock in the next cycle, and it's going to spill well into the next year. And then that can
yeah,
also be really hard to sell to your leadership.
yes, for sure.
uh I don't see us getting rid of the like alpha beta GA between minor versions and saying, oh yeah, just skip forward left and right. So without that, having only 3 a year means you're already pretty much guaranteed to take a year to deliver, which means there's a lot of pressure to not miss a release for the first one. I think before that there was a bit less concerned about that. And I was like, well, you still might finish this year if you tried to start in January and you wound up being in the next release.
Right. So Dan's been waiting a long time.
Yeah, and that gets into what I was going to ask, which is, are we still going to have these windows of 1 year, or are we sticking with 3 releases? And if we're doing the 4 releases in a year and sticking with 3 releases to get a feature out, maybe that's plausible. But certainly in the 12 releases a year thing, we can't say,
Can't get feedback fast enough.
yeah. And so in that case, are you actually increasing velocity, right? Like, are you helping the people who want things to move faster if we need that time for feedback and to give people a chance to upgrade and all of those other things? Is the deprecation window going to shrink from a year as it is now,
Stand.
or yeah?
I don't
So
think you can
I think
sell
it's
the
LTS
release on
discussion.
12 a year, but if you did have it, then you could say, I mean, you don't have to do like 3. We could say like graduating is like 6 or something. Like you have more room to play with it if it's more often. I think that's true even with 4, right? Like you could argue that it needs to be a whole year, but maybe it doesn't. And the more frequent releases we have, the more granular we can be with the policy for graduating.
Yeah, and it's also LTS discussion the same way, right? So we need to decide, like, is there some, if you go to 12 releases, is there some key releases that people can stick with?
You're saying almost like a TikTok type of thing where it's like, well, we do a feature release, a patch, not a patch release, but a feature release, and then just bug fixes. I mean, we already do patch releases, right? But still a minor release, but really not. So it might include some features, but not heavily focused on features. I don't know. I don't know. That doesn't seem like it's more complicated.
you can only target features for even numbered releases, but if you miss, you're allowed to put it out in the odd one.
I don't like that. I hear what you're saying. That just gets complicated. So
No,
I,
this is
I think
more
it's a
like
cool thought experiment, but
was the
I
LTS
think, sorry. I was just gonna say I think this is a cool thought experiment, but it doesn't seem very plausible to me that we're gonna go to SIG release and say like, hey, why don't we jump to 12?
yeah, it's
Yeah,
true.
but I do think it's plausible if we wanted to say, hey, how about we go to 4?
I think that is plausible, David. I agree. I just not sure. I guess it's up to the community. What Andre's got something to say.
Yeah, I have actually different question outside of the LTS, but I just want to like come back on the point that Kevin mentioned about what goes to core and what doesn't go to core. I think we talked about this last year in Japan, if I remember correctly. I was wondering if community, like end up with any sort of policy or, documents, who will make this final decision?
There's no official, and we have a scope. So this community, like architecture, has a scope document that describes the general scope of Kubernetes, and so um, that's the only thing we have that other than the kind of judgment of the SIGs and the rest of the community as to whether something is
I think every
there's
feature 2-part, right? It's like, is it in scope for the project? And then that's like, are we going to host it in a SIG somewhere? And then there's, can you I think at this point it's like, can you accomplish this, or like, do you really need to change core to do it?
right. Like the cap you were asking about yesterday or whatever, Andre, like the for DRA, and I think we got pushback about like, oh, we could accomplish this out of tree, right? And it's true, we could accomplish it out of tree. What you get by doing it in tree is you get that it can be expected to be everywhere, right? And so like you with Kubeflow could rely on it being there as opposed to like, oh, now I got to wait and did they install this third party thing, right? So it's a little hard um, for things like that where yes, they're technically in scope, but they're enhancements that could be accomplished out of tree, but they're, it makes them less useful when they're out of tree.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, but technically, like with extensibility of Kubernetes, the many things can be, done out of tree, right? I
Yeah.
guess it's kind of hard to really navigate right now. I would say, like, from a maintainer perspective, what should go where. And then it's, out of tree can give you, much more velocity and, speed up, etc. But, it would be really nice if, SIGs and others will come up to something which, could make it clear what is the right approach, right?
Yeah, I
I mean,
I
it's
think
never will
really,
be single decision, right? I mean, sometimes you see a good pattern and you implement it in core. Like, I don't think we can ever say it's forever this way and never will be changed.
yeah. I mean, what I see really needs to be done in Tree is if there's new APIs or something like a CRI like
New
addition.
extension points. Yeah.
Yeah, new extension points is where it makes the most sense. Like workload aware scheduling, like we have to ask people to implement new scheduling APIs. Makes sense. DRA makes sense. Like, new controllers, those can be out of tree, which is kind of what we've done with like, agent sandbox or leader worker set or job set is like we have all the APIs we need from Cube so we can build them using, Cube Builder or an ecosystem tool. And that's sort of like, yeah, so that's what's challenging because then, yeah, sometimes like the SIG apps related things, a lot of those things can be done out of tree now, but like having too many controllers that do very similar things does cause like some chaos in the community too. So I but yeah, at least that's
Yeah.
where I see the features that really make a big move, like why their keps are needed is when there's usually new APIs or you're asking the entire ecosystem to kind of react to a certain issue. Like maybe, like for storage, there might be new fields in the storage API that all the CSI vendors can rely on. And that's at least kind of the area where I see the intrigue going. But it does make it hard for any AI, any AI infra kind of feature, because these things do tend to be they tend to be very opinionated.
Yeah, I think I mean, from my perspective, I like the idea that in Kubernetes, like focus on extension points and make sure, other communities and sub-projects can benefit out of it. And just, like make it clear for end users that, hey, Kubernetes is great, but you kind of like need to look for all this ecosystem to ensure you have like, your problems being solved. I think this is maybe like the right direction, probably we should go, but I agree with the statement.
Okay. So on the release cadence topic, what are our next steps here? Does somebody want to take this to some other forums, or should we send out some notes on, David, you want to send something out to some of the broader email lists, chairs and leads or something, and
Well,
Big
what would
Arch
it
and
take
wherever?
for you to feel comfortable that it was worth asking SIG release to go to 4 releases a year?
I think we need a broader consensus from SIG leads on whether they would be like whether they wouldn't whether they'd be excited or terrified or unwilling to.
All right.
So yeah,
Uh,
that's
then then I will work on crafting that email
awesome. Okay, awesome, awesome. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think we can agree that 12 is just like such a massive undertaking. It's probably not somewhere we want to go.
It,
is 6 too
52.
big of a jump? Is 6 too big of a jump?
I suspect so, but I think for my case it would be like let's see what happens when we suggest 4, and see how people react. 4 has the advantage of we've done it before. Um, we
I
had
mean, if we're going to make a change, we should not make a change twice. So I would say you can start with 4, but maybe just have a little line in there that says, or maybe even 6.
Sure.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking as well.
When we look at 4, we have a strong baseline for
Experience.
this is what the promotion looks like. This is what it looks like for X many releases or years. And that all just comes back naturally. I suppose I have the advantage of remembering it. With 6, you don't have that. natural, like, we just revert the docs back to where they were. But sure, I'll add a little line or 6.
Yeah, I
Speaking
think
of
6 will
comfortable with it
require.
and talking about remembering it, you've reminded me that we do have yet another problem. SIG Infra has, I'm not super involved there now, but I kind of like keep an eye on it. And they have set up a dashboard now publicly where you can see our spend. And we're back to like basically exhausting our major cloud spend. If we go back to 4, we'll have another branch to run CI for and stuff. So that's another small thing that like we'll have to get back to a healthier state on our budget before we can spin up a bunch more CI again. I think that's sort of thing's going to keep happening anyhow, but like it happens that we're currently at that place. And that was one of the conversations with the LTS things before. Was like, okay, so you want to keep a branch around for a long time? How that it has like literal financial cost. 4 will
So
be
you can run
smaller,
all
but
the
it still
jobs
has one.
rarer, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
we can bump every periodic from 1 day to 2 days, and it will solve the problem.
Right. There's a bunch of stuff around like, okay, we have like 3 branches, deal with that. Adding it to 4 means like there's a period where you're going to have an extra branch to test. I don't think it's catastrophic or anything, but I think a lot of the spend goes to areas that won't change anyhow. But like, it's there. There's a lot of implications to changing this. I'd love to hear from more of the like chairs and leads, maybe that mailing list or that meeting.
So
Yeah,
when
I
we
think
did 4, does that mean that we are supporting all 4 releases at a single time, or could
Yeah,
we
that's what
still
we've done in
keep
the
with
past.
3?
4
Oh, okay.
releases, 1 year.
Okay.
We have to have the same time duration on how much we support. Like that was part of the LTS. Like we can't shorten the time duration, so that means we extend one more release probably, and it might even mean our SKUs have to extend a little further. I don't know about that, but it's a possibility.
It also, so we also like currently we wind up with 4 for a little while because of the like overlap in branches going up and down isn't clean, and SIG release usually leaves a little bit of room to like if there's like a final really bad CVE or something like that. So it'll be more like 4 to 5 branches at the max.
going back to 4 versus 6, for me, 4 it's the same bureaucracy, but more often. 6 is rethink the processes. So planning wouldn't work anymore because it's just 2 months, and like I just cannot sustain the same planning model any longer. So you need to change the model of operating. So switching to 4 is kind of feels like more work. Switching to 6 feels like I need to adjust and change how SIG works.
Right, and then you could argue, well, if we're going to 6, we're adjusting how everything works. Do we go all the way to 12? Like,
Exactly, yes. Once you
it's like it's a
thought how
different
to
mode of
work with SIG.
operation. Yeah, yeah.
And same for documentation, for instance. Like, I don't know, for 4, it's just so much more work because nobody will change the process. For 6, process will change and it will be just streamlined.
I wanted to ask before we move on from this topic. Um, so someone brought up the um, reviews and everything. Like, but Janet, you were talking about in. I mean, obviously it's a smaller, newer project, but like um, the reviewer bandwidth. Um, what is your experience on the? You brought a lot of AI pre-reviews into things and stuff like that. Like, how much are you able to like? Um, could we address that with the, you said it's easier to automate things now, and I agree, and that includes the review process, right? So like, do you have anything to add there as far as like your experience with how you can do weekly releases, which is obviously dramatically faster than what we're talking about here?
Yeah, so basically, originally we had a lot of issues with reviewer bandwidth because there's just too many PRs to review. And then a lot of the PRs are from the first time contributors, which make it like taking longer for maintainers to review. But basically, after we introduced the AI pre-reviewer, which is mainly code rapid, we started with trying out Copilot, but then after we get Code Rapid access, we start using that more, and then it's doing pretty well. A lot of the PRs get first review, and the quality improves. So by the time when human reviewers need to look at the PRs, it becomes much easier for everyone. And I also get trying to collect feedback from the contributors as well. Started this week. I collect some feedback. It's generally positive. There are some feedback about they feel like the AI preview reviewer asked for too much. Sometimes, for example, it asks for a scope that's larger than this PR tries to do, or some changes that's pre-existing, but I think we can tune that with some prompts or configuration or the tool. But in general, I think it's really helpful for maintainers.
Okay. So that is like how you manage to address some of the reviewer feedback is that the tooling works pretty well, even if it needs improvements.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Um, so I mean, I think if we do think about retooling processes, like going beyond four, and maybe even if we do, I think Kevin's saying in the chat, like we would want to do some of these things anyway. Like we would want to learn from this, and try and take some pressure off reviewers. Um, okay, so uh, unless there's more people want to say about this, I think our next step, Steve, is going to try and get more discussion going with the broader SIG leads community. And Swati, do you want to talk about your topic or?
Sure. Yeah, I
Okay.
can. And I think it's not as complex as the previous one, so we can have a quick discussion about this. And
Do
I
you want
think
to
the
display
whole
anything or?
no, the issue is already there. People can have a
Okay.
look. It's quite straightforward. I was reviewing a bunch of caps this cycle, and I noticed asking the same questions multiple times, and that prompted me to think maybe there is some way we can standardize the graduation process, alpha to beta, beta to GA, just to make sure that, we are not repeating this. The simplest solution to this is add some questions in the KEP template itself. But I'm open to, discussing it with the wider group on ideas around how we can improve this process. I know, PRR reviewers have been doing a bunch of work, and that was kind of mentioned already in the issue, just to enforce all these things. But, just to shift this left a little bit and put the load on the contributor while they are contributing and graduating their features. Yeah, so I just wanted to have a discussion around this. While I think it's been a while since I created the issue, so I see there's already a contributor who uh, created a PR to update the enhancement template, which is a great starting point. But I wanted to discuss if there's anything else we can do to improve and optimize this process.
Yeah, I guess so. I think sometimes I'm a little I know from the PRR side, like we are trying, as I was saying in the issue, we are trying to enforce that basically beta on is GA. I feel like there's some confusion, maybe that's not really the stance of the project, or maybe some of the SIGs are not as aware that, because I see it a lot of times where people are saying like, oh, we can do this in beta, and I always do kind of, we do push back on the PRR side, especially if it's like I can add metrics after I turn the feature gate on or things like that. And I think that's the thing we were trying to avoid, because like a feature on does mean it's pretty
It's
much
done.
by yeah, it's basically done. And so that's at least why we are pushing for that in the PRR, to make sure that like when a feature goes to beta, it's basically GA. And that's what we meant by zero diff beta to GA is basically that it's ready to go and we did everything. And I do understand why part of it is with the 4 month release cycle. There's a lot of push to say I can get this in alpha and then keep iterating. And I just don't know. We don't have it well represent. We don't really represent that well in the KEP that there's like work ongoing to bring it to beta, and so like that's
Well, there's always work on going to bring it to beta. I think it's the bringing it to GA. Like in the release where it goes to GA, there should only be bug fixes of things that were discovered. Like that would just be like even if it were already GA, you'd be doing bug fixes, right? Like that's a normal part of the process every release. But like there shouldn't be any functional additions. There shouldn't be any metrics should have already been there at beta. Like it should have been fully supportable. Um,
yeah, I
that's
agree.
that's how I see it. Yeah, Sergey.
I I think the stance is the same across like the board for beta to GA transition, so it should be like no code change. But I feel like, especially with 3 releases, we have more and more situations when we want to have feature enabled by default with some functionality and then iterate through that over a couple of releases. So it's not, I don't know if we have it written somewhere, but if you want to change the stance saying beta by default is GA, then it will be, I mean, I think it will be changed for many caps and change for understanding.
Well, I think it's a. I think we made this change a while ago, right? That we wanted these betas to be fully like functionally complete, and the way at least we've tried to address that like in DRA is that we have broken up into a lot more caps with a lot more feature gates, right? So like we try to, and then they can independently move right to beta or whatever, and we may find problems during the beta. That's expected, right? And so we may do multiple betas and whatever, but like functionally, things were all there. We believed it was complete and working. And um, ideally, if we want to iterate, it means like if it's different function, it's different feature, it's different feature gate. Um, is that not how you're seeing it, Sergey, when you say that there are times when you want to iterate in beta, or are you talking about bug fixes or performance improvements, or are you talking about functional iteration?
The hope is that feature stays the same and it will be more of a like tuning and like making sure it's reliable, like handling edge cases. But sometimes
Find a
I don't
problem.
have
Yeah.
examples ready, but
Okay.
like yeah,
You find a
so
design
no,
flaw or even an API issue and you do another beta, I think that's okay. You still can't go to GA. You just have to do another beta. It's more like at the time you go to beta, you shouldn't know about that already, right?
Exactly. By the time you go to beta, your feature needs to be production ready. You need to believe that it is finished. And the only difference between beta and GA is that beta you can turn back off. But otherwise, the expectations for reliability and monitorability and debuggability are the same as GA.
I generally agree with that. I don't feel that we enforce it across the board, and I don't feel that there is any expectation that any customer will try it before beta. So with that, it's really hard to
That's a
say
change.
it's complete.
Yeah, that kind of brings up, I mean, I know at least downstream wise, like what we are finding is beta on like is really just stable, and like we are sort of thinking about shifting more of our, like when we have like a tech preview or enabling features early, we start looking at like alpha, maybe not so much for API changes, but like we have had cases like where alpha features that are relatively getting more stable will enable early, and that maybe kind of gets it so we have more feedback on alpha, because like effectively we are saying like, and we see it, like people aren't aware of a feature going beta on and it's available in a cluster, and even though the feature is not stable, customers can use it, And so like we effectively do need to maybe have a place where users use more alpha features. Like, and I think that's probably fine as long as, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I think getting feedback for features is tough, but beta on is basically it's stable. Like that's kind of what we are finding is unless there's not an API change, users can use that feature on a cluster where that feature is enabled. And most, from what I see, most downstream providers are not disabling all the feature gates unless they're stable. I think some people would like to do that, but I think there are too many feature gates in Cube right now, so I don't think a lot of people are probably just disabling them like a blanket disablement of beta features.
I mean, I know we follow the upstream in the sense that unless there's a reason, we sometimes we do turn things off if there's a reason, but mostly, and Ben can correct me if I'm wrong, but mostly we follow the upstream.
Yeah, but I think there's a difference, which is actually what I was going to raise. So, out of some of the larger managed ones in GKE, there are some ways that you can do things like run an alpha cluster that's like time bound, but you can turn on pretty arbitrary upstream things and try them out. And then we have some stuff where maybe we might like opt into supporting, say, a beta API. But for both feature gates and APIs, my understanding is that EKS and AKS, which is a lot of clusters, you cannot control any of this as a user. So whatever is default upstream is what you're getting. Like they pretty much stick with the defaults, and you can't do it. You can't say like, "Oh, I want to use this beta API. It should be pretty stable." It's like, no, it has to be GA. I was running into this recently with a project I'm working on.
Well, I think that's actually true. So I think in GKE we can't enable a beta API that's not enabled by default. I don't think we have a flag for that.
Well, we can, we have, you can set up to
For an alpha cluster, you can, but not in a production cluster.
No, we do have betas that a team has to like agree to support it and like set up some things. It's like an opt-in process, but if the product has opted in, then the customer has the option to opt in.
Right. I'm
But
saying
what I'm saying is
it's not
that
a yeah.
there are a lot of clusters from big vendors where like you can't do this at all. It's just the defaults, and
Mhm.
and so users are very coupled to how we choose our defaults.
Andre.
Yeah, I'm just curious. Like, I think this is a very good point in terms of like getting early feedback for alpha features. Did you ever consider to kind of have this as part of the requirements for AlphaGo to better to have some ecosystem integrations? I understand, it could be really tough for cloud providers to provide support for alpha features. But I mean, at least if third-party projects, if it is SIG project or CNCF projects, have some integration with those alpha features, I think it might give us some sort of signal that, like feature can go to beta and GA. I think this is what we try to do with VAS, right, and workload-aware scheduling. But I think this effort should kind of be, I think, socialized across the broader picture of Kubernetes. And I like what we've done for VAS over the past year. I think it was the right call.
I mean, I think if we're building like extension points like WAS or DRA or whatever, like you need consumers of that. So like NVIDIA was closely involved in building DRA, right? And they consumed those APIs. And for WAS, I mean, where they are upstream things, but the controllers and other ecosystem projects like we're building in those integrations. That makes a lot of sense. I'm not sure it applies to all features, but to features that are intended to be used that way, it makes sense that we have customers of them. And you'll see in some of those like graduation criteria, which is I think how we came to this that Swati was talking about, is like, used by this many vendors, if it's like a plugin interface or used by, implemented by both Containerd and Cryo, or like we sometimes have those in those graduation criteria. I think the question at hand here is like, can we standardize any of that, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, go
I think the
ahead.
difference between alpha and beta is if we asking customers to adopt it, on a real scale. Like, I mean, we discuss alpha with customers, but if we ask them to adopt it for something that they want some guarantee that API will not go away, that there will be some transition plan, and the only guarantee we can give is from beta. That's why it's tough to ask them to use alpha in anything real.
Also, more than that, like if we're gonna push this on the like KEP owners that they have to collect this evidence, that could be really difficult. Like, say you don't work at like a hyperscaler or something. Like, how do you know if like GK used it? And then like, I mean, coming from the side of like working on ecosystem projects more lately, I don't really want to integrate with an alpha. I might do like a quick proof of concept, but I don't want to merge code that depends on an alpha because I have no idea if it's gonna succeed. Like, why would I spend a lot of time actually shipping an integration with an alpha? Also, because again, even betas, we're finding that like there's pushback from people that want to collaborate with us on projects, saying like, well, if you depend on a beta, then I lose all the like EKS users. So don't take a beta depension on a beta API. So then like we would just deadlock on building things.
Yeah, but to your point, it's not only GKey customers, GKey versus non-GKey. It's like pod level resources. We yet to get Istio to adopt it because first they don't have a lot of contributors, but second is API is not stable. They're like, oh, make it stable first. And like, but we want your feedback. Like, but make it stable first. It's an infinite.
Yeah, like mutating and validating admission policy. I feel like I'm seeing validating admission policy is like finally starting to see a lot of uptake, and people are pretty happy with it. But like table stakes for a lot of projects was it's been GA for a while, so that all the versions they support have it. Otherwise, they have to build a webhook anyhow, and it's too expensive to build a webhook and a validating admission policy and keep them in sync. And like I think a lot of extension features are going to have that problem. So it's like a fine thing. We want the feedback, but I think setting a really hard rule on it might block us from building things that we're otherwise still pretty confident in that just aren't going to have a lot of adoption for a while until they're mature.
Mhm. Yeah, it's this whole chicken and egg thing. It's hard. I think we're pretty much out of time. So what I would ask is that people with opinions on this dig into Swati's issue that she's filed there um, and make some comments. And I think that's it, unless anybody else has any quick comments. Okay, thanks everybody. See you next time.